Resilience really comes in the long run, not in short moments. And that was a very difficult, lesson to learn coming from it, being in athletics and just wanting to get better. When you're going through difficulty, no matter if it's chronic illness or relationship issues, work issues, you want it to be over. You want to sprint through it so that you get to the other side. But usually what we don't understand at the time is that the greatest lessons in life and the greatest opportunities to know ourselves come within the most difficult moments.
Chronic illness forced a reckoning. What emerged was clarity, resilience, and a life redesigned with intention. Welcome to Streams to Impact, brought to you by Steve Tucker Capital. I'm your host, Dr. Allen. When the body says no, life has a way of clarifying what truly matters. Today's conversation is about resilience, not as pushing through, but as listening, discerning, and redesigning life with intention. Before we begin, I want to invite you into Beyond the Paycheck, the Financial Clarity Compass, a private instructional masterclass for professionals who want their money working as intentionally as they do. And you can access our free gift at www.go.stevetucker.com/beyond-paycheck. All information shared on Streams to Impact is for educational purposes only. It is not intended to be financial, legal, or tax advice. All investments incur risk. You should not invest if you are not prepared to lose 100% of your investments. And you're always encouraged to consult your legal, accounting, and tax advisors before making any investment. Some stories of resilience aren't about overcoming obstacles. They're about learning how to live honestly inside of them. Today's guest, Athena Brownson, is a former professional skier whose life and work were reshaped by navigating chronic illness. That experience didn't just change her pace. It clarified who and what her priorities were and defined her decision going forward and redefined her understanding of strength. Athena's story is not about pushing through at all cost. It's about listening when the body says no and allowing that boundary to become a source of clarity, resilience, and intentional living. So today's conversation is about what becomes possible when limits are met with honesty rather than with resistance. So, Athena, welcome. We're glad you are with us today. So, you have faced chronic illness along the way. And so when the body started to say no, what did it force you to confront about how you were living and working?
First of all, thank you for the beautiful introduction. That was absolutely lovely. And I have to answer that question by backtracking a little bit. So to really understand my mindset and my frame of how I was approaching the world, I was a professional athlete, as you said. I was coached to pretty much push through anything. I was skiing 300 days a year around the world for over a decade. I went through, I believe, 17 surgeries during that 10-year period. Wow. And I would just consistently get up, rehab myself, and keep going on to the next. So I had a very driven and determined mindset. But as I got older and I encountered chronic illness, I found myself bedridden. I had never experienced in all my years of injury and facing adversity, so to speak, I had never faced something that was so all-encompassing, something that I didn't have the option but to listen to my body, because if I did try and push through, I simply would collapse. I wasn't physically able to. So it created almost a little bit of a identity crisis. I had really put so much of my life into into what I did, that I realized that my identity became intertwined with what it was that I was doing, not who I was as a person. So it really made me come face to face with this. And it made me come face to face with understanding who I am apart from my productivity or accolades or how much I was accomplishing. And for a young person, that was extremely difficult, but probably one of the greatest gifts I could have been given in hindsight.
I can imagine that as great as the pain was, I expect the psychological pain was even more significant. So, how did you come through that time?
I think the only way to come through is to put one foot in front of the other, truly. When I was at my sickest, I had such a bad electromagnetic frequency sensitivity, it's called. So basically, any radiation from LED lights, phones, computers, that if I picked up my phone, I would get an electrical burn on my hand. If I used my computer, I had electrical burns all over my chest. And I ended up having to move into an RV that wasn't connected to any electricity because I was so sensitive to my environment.
Wow.
So I look at those months of living in an RV without electricity, no Wi-Fi, needing to put on lead gloves if I was using my cell phone. And I think the greatest gift that I actually gave myself at that time was the opportunity to mourn. I needed the chance to mourn the health that had fled my body and the life that I had once led, especially coming from being an elite level athlete where I had, quite a bit of control over my body, to feeling very helpless and very out of control. And what I really learned about, encountering adversity is that we have to give ourselves the opportunity to mourn and to feel whatever sadness, whatever anger comes up around that. The key is just not letting yourself get stuck there. And for me, that looked like having a really amazing support system around me, my friends, family, doctors, clients, and having something that I was really passionate about, which is my work. I absolutely love what I do. I in the real estate world here in Denver, and that was something that I could keep my eyes fixated upon no matter how bad I felt. I knew that it was something that I could always come to. And it kept my mind from basically going down the rabbit hole, I would say. But it was a godsend.
Yeah. Well, what kind of skiing did you do?
So I started off as a ski racer, and when I was 13 years old, I switched to the dark side, my dad would say, and I started freestyle skiing. So I primarily did half pipe and slope style, and then some big mountain skiing. But it took me all over the world, so I'm extremely grateful. It was a really good time, to say the least.
Yeah, freestyling looks like a lot of fun, but I can see that could be really hard on the body, especially over a period of time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you came through that.
Thank you.
So, resilience is often framed as pushing through. How did your experience reshape what strength actually means to you?
That's a beautiful question. Thank you. I believe that I was one of those people that meant that resilience was pushing through no matter the circumstance. It was, being gritty, having the strength to get through anything that you're encountering. But what I recognized more in hindsight, going through years and years of chronic illness, is that resilience is found in the small moments. Resilience is not, overriding what your body's needs are, but zooming out and recognizing that if you are going to be in this for the long haul, or facing something for an extended period of time, that you're simply going to run yourself into the ground. And if you do not take care of your body. So having, I think real strength comes from being able to look within and understand what the body needs that day. And it does change on an hour by hour, day-to-day basis. And to be able to check in with yourself, figure out where you're at and what you're capable of at that moment, and do the best you possibly can at that moment. And if that means that the best you can do is make it from the bed to the couch, then that's a win, because you're doing the best that you possibly can. But you're not forcing yourself to push through to a point that is actually going to be detrimental to your well-being. And resilience really comes in the long run, not in short moments. It's found in small moments, but it's small moments that accumulate on one another to create a story of resilience. And that was a very difficult, lesson to learn, coming from it, being in athletics and just wanting to get better. When you're going through difficulty, no matter if it's chronic illness or relationship issues, work issues, you want it to be over. You want to sprint through it so that you get to the other side. But usually what we don't understand at the time is that the greatest lessons in life and the greatest opportunities to know ourselves come within the most difficult moments. So instead of sprinting through it and not having the awareness of what it is that you're learning, it's being able to sit with whatever uncomfortability there is, because that's really where growth happens. You never look back at life and think about how much you learned and grew when life was easy. It's in the most difficult moments, unfortunately, but I think that's what creates beauty out of difficult moments.
Yeah, I can certainly relate to that. I can look back on the worst times in my life as actually being the best times.
Yeah.
But of course, in those moments, they never feel like the best times. That's for sure.
That is for sure.
It's only in hindsight. So as you have lived many different identities, businesswoman, athlete, investor, and you touched on this a little bit, but if you can go just a bit deeper in terms of how illness actually changed your relationship to identity, and not just identity, but ambition, because from what you've described, you certainly were in a situation where it would have been reasonable for you to really relinquish any kind of ambition and just give in to it. So how did all of that come about?
Yeah, absolutely. I've always been someone that is very goal oriented, and more than ever when I became sick, it became really critical for me to find things to look forward to, goals to set. Whether it was, again, on a day-to-day basis, creating small goals of how can I possibly be the best I can today. But it also really forced me to start analyzing and being really intentional with how I was using my time, because all of a sudden time became very finite. It became something that I might get 3 hours a day of good work done, as opposed to, working 11-hour days like I was used to. So I had to learn how to really be intentional about what I was doing in my time, and not being busy, but actually being productive. It also made me recognize that I was not going to be able to do this alone. Being that I was in a one-man sport of skiing, and I was an only child as well, I was used to getting everything done on my own. And that meant that I was I was doing activities that were not even in one of my strengths, so to speak. And when I had to kind of take a step back and recognize, okay, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? And then from that, what are things that I can delegate to my team that are going to help me to not burn myself out, not overextend myself, but give other people the opportunity to succeed, because where my weaknesses are could be their strengths. So it's giving an opportunity for them to do what they're really passionate and good at. And it taught me the art of delegation, to be totally honest. It taught me the importance of teamwork and the importance of not doing everything by yourself, because quite simply, we're not the masters of every single trade. And when we can find someone, our counterparts, to help fill in those gaps and allow them to excel, that's where, those big goals are accomplished. And also, talking about how do you keep ambition. I think when you surround yourself with a community of like-minded people that, are going to help you stay very goal oriented and help you from, throwing in the towel, that iron sharpens iron. It comes down to what you're feeding your brain with. And I had so many doctors, I had multiple doctors say, you should just go on disability, go on bed rest and wait it out. And I talked to my main infectious disease doctor, because I had Lyme disease, and they knew my background as an athlete and knew that was going to be, absolutely detrimental to my health, to be sitting at home really just seeping and stirring in how sick I was, and not having something to keep me driving forward. So having something that I was passionate about was my driving force. And honestly, it was what kept me from falling into a deep depression and from sitting in the mud for too long. So I'm extremely grateful. But I really think it came down to having an amazing support system and just having a background that made me want to continue pushing forward.
Well, in all of that, coming to terms with your self, how did you find that path from professional skier to professional real estate?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I like to think my life I've had many lives already at the age of 35, because they've been very distinct chapters. But, real estate was actually in my family, in my blood. My dad's a residential real estate developer in Breckenridge, Colorado. So he builds beautiful homes. And I grew up going, walking job sites with him and really watching the entire build process and really falling in love with homes. Now, what I didn't fall in love with at all at the time were realtors. I thought that, realtors were a little bit of a dime a dozen, kind of used car salesmen, because we had more real estate offices in Breckenridge than we did t-shirt shops. And that's really saying something for a tourist town. So when I, finished up college after my skiing career, I was absolutely in love with the home and with design. And I started working as an interior designer. It taught me so much, but what I recognized was that I needed to be responsible for my own success. Coming from being an athlete, I wanted to find a profession where the amount of input I put in, I would see it in the output, and there wasn't really a cap on how far I could take it. And I was expressing this to a dear friend of mine at the time, and just, trying to sort out what I wanted to do and where I was going to go next with my life and career, because I felt very lost. This is after doing interior design for probably about 2 years. I felt very stagnant. And whenever I'm feeling stagnant in life, I recognize that something needs to change. And my friend was in real estate, and she looked at me and kind of laughed and said, "Athena, you love people, you love homes, you love design, and you have a knowledge of building, and development. Why don't you just, talk to the owner of my company, see if real estate is something that you actually might want to explore. And, if it's not the right thing, then at least you checked it off the list." I sat down with the owner of our company a couple days later, and he was one of the most he is one of the most joyous, incredible humans I've ever met, and he really explained to me the art of relationship based business, and how intimate the relationship of helping someone find their home is, and how being a trusted advisor in real estate is something to be really cherished. So he completely changed my outlook on what being a realtor meant. And I actually quit my job the next day, signed up for real estate school, and then about 3 months later, I was mentoring under him. So I followed everything he did for about a year, and it taught me everything I knew. But it's been almost 12 years now, which is hard to believe. And I wouldn't trade it for the world. It's something that I love dearly, and I never, ever would have expected it.
Yeah, a lot of the best things in life are serendipitous, and certainly that has been the case in my life.
Yeah.
Well, coming up to, I guess, really kind of the present now, what is one challenge you faced recently that taught you something unexpected about yourself and how you now move through the world?
It's an excellent question. So that this is the first year in 9 years now that I have actually started making progress with my health. I have, I've put in so much work to trying to find what it was going to be that was the right combination for getting me back to health. And finally, these years of really intentional work and really difficult, getting plasma transfusions every other week, and getting, you name it, I've gone through it over the last 9 years. But what I've recognized through that is that I started to revert to my old tendencies of pushing through anything that was, coming towards me, because I started to feel a little bit better, and I wasn't recognizing that if I pushed too hard, then I was going to be setting myself back for days on end. So continuing, I should say, to seek balance and find balance within my life and health and work and all of the things that, encompass my current life has been something that I've had to have a really strong awareness of. And it's taught me that although, I've learned so much over the last 9 years about listening to my body, that it can go away really quickly with a glimmer of hope, and how important it is for me to continue to really check in with myself and make sure that I'm taking care of myself, because there are consequences to not doing so. And that's been, eye-opening for me, because I thought that I had got this down, and that I was extremely self-aware and knew how to take care of myself. But, that old athlete in me definitely popped up, and then I'd be in bed for a couple of days, and that's not productive for anyone or a happy place to be. So it's really taught me that, no matter where I'm at with my health journey, with my work, that I have to be continually checking in with myself and making sure that I'm doing the routines and the habits that keep me in a place of being, mentally, physically, and spiritually well.
For someone listening whose body or circumstances or life is just forcing a reckoning, what would you want them to know about redesigning a life with intention rather than resistance?
Yeah. So it's such a difficult thing when you're in that. And that's the first thing I would say, is that, no one is diminishing what you're going through, because whatever it is, that whatever adversity someone's facing is real and relevant to their lives and shouldn't be diminished. But kind of going back to what I said earlier, when we look back at the most profound moments in our lives and the times that we have really made huge growth or really learned about ourselves or made pivotal decisions. It's usually when we're going through something that is the most challenging thing that we've encountered. So when we're in the midst of adversity, when we're feeling, completely run down and tired of battling whatever it is that we're battling, recognizing that more than ever, that's the time to intentionally lean in and lean into the uncomfortable, figure out what it is that is the root of what you're supposed to be learning from this. And I guarantee that when you get to the other side and you look back at what you've overcome, not only will you feel a tremendous sense of pride and accomplishment, but you'll also recognize that you are probably learning one of the greatest lessons that you could for this chapter in your life. So no matter what you're encountering, recognizing that there is something that will come from it that will make you a better version of yourself. That doesn't mean it's easy. That doesn't mean that, your challenge is not recognized, but it is something that will keep your eyes looking ahead and hopefully your head up.
Well, I appreciate that, Athena. Good information from someone who has certainly been there. Before we close, I do have one last question, but before we go into that, just kind of want to have a reflection on what we've talked about here. So today's conversation wasn't about overcoming or conquering, but it was about actually listening. And we explored how chronic illness can become a clarifying force, stripping away noise, urgency, and false definitions of strength and identity. And we talked about resilience as discernment, about learning what to keep, what to release, and how to redesign a life with intention rather than resistance. And this was a conversation about honesty, limits, and the quiet clarity that can emerge when the body draws a line and we choose to listen to this. And I certainly thank you, Athena, for your straightforwardness and your honesty. Always refreshing to have these kinds of conversations. So for those who want to stay connected with Athena Brownson, you can find her on Instagram at Athena Brownson Realtor, where she shares behind-the-scenes insights from her real estate projects, investing perspectives, and personal reflections on resilience and building a life that you love. So you'll also find opportunities there to connect with her directly. So Athena, our final question here today. When all is said and done and you do come to the end of this life's journey, what do you hope was most true about how you lived your life?
When, I, more than anything, my goal is to let people know that they're not alone and to inspire them that if, my 5-foot little self can get through the challenges that I have faced, and that anyone can get through anything, and understanding and being inspired by how powerful we are, and the fact that, listening to your body is not weakness. It's not giving up. It's a strength. And if I can inspire anyone to understand that and take care of themselves a little bit better, then I will be a very happy person.
Well, thank you, Athena, once again for your honesty and clarity. It has been a pleasure. And to our enlightened investors, thank you for spending this time with us. If today resonated, especially if life has asked you to slow down, reassess, or redesign, I hope this conversation reminded you that clarity can emerge from listening rather than pushing. If you'd like to continue exploring how high-achieving professionals align capital with stability, purpose, and long-term impact, I invite you to Beyond the Paycheck, the Financial Clarity Compass. This private educational experience is our gift to you, and you can claim it at www.go.steedtalker.com/beyond-paycheck. Until next time, stay grounded, stay intentional, and keep building a life and legacy that truly fits.
Thank you for tuning into Streams to Impact, brought to you by Steed Talker Capital, a company empowering passionate professionals like you to develop multiple streams of passive income built on solid passive real estate investments. As a significant part of our endeavors to make a cosmic and meaningful impact for this world, Steed Talker Capital contributes significant portions of our profits to activities and organizations committed to better understanding the equine. These endeavors attempt to enhance the treatment of horses worldwide. Steed Talker Capital, working for a world where all creatures great and small flourish abundantly. If you are ready to learn how our passive investors have earned an average 33% annual return on their investments, schedule your complimentary passive income to Prideful Impact consultation. Obviously, we cannot continue indefinitely to offer these valuable consultations for free, so grab your passive income to Prideful Impact consultation while you still can. Go to steedtalker.com/passive